think I've spent the last 35 years looking for the cure, which I know doesn't exist and it's not needed. The Echelon method is an educational program that you're the teacher, but you're teaching me how to speak in a rational, correct way, and it's giving me education on how I can improve my own speech. I have got a good control now after 3 days. To be honest, I had a good control after day 1. When you first met Roman in 2012, it became clear once you had been exposed to his learnings that this would be a very, very important thing for people that stammer, and that you can use this in your education for people that have speech problems. It was originally in the Russian language, but you needed to make this available to people in the English-speaking language. It was perfect Echelon speech. It gives me a good run into a problem word. I also get a lot of silent blocks. Sometimes I bite my own tongue. It's like, and that bloody hurts. Or sort of writing an A. I ought to be able to write an A. I actually work on a street called Burrard Street, and I go to a coffee shop, Burrard, and I also go to a coffee shop called Blends. We have 3 dogs of our own.
Okay, so we always begin with answering questions.
I think it was just the same things I had asked you before. It was more about the fact that my speech on the whole seems reasonable, but since I thought about it, it's horrible.
Let me translate.
Каким образом вы это понимаете?
How did you realize that it was horrible?
I think it's just realizing what I'm actually doing wrong, and it's all of my own doing. I think I've managed to struggle along, but I had reached a point where it was the blocks it was just really, really bad. So
This is very simple, very easy to explain, because you probably studied physics in school.
Mm-hmm.
And you do understand what force is.
yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah.
In order to use easily our speech apparatus, we should understand clearly the basics of physics.
Okay. After the first day of the class, I spent a good deal of time speaking with the family. Had many conversations with them, introduced a lot of my previous feared words into the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I also made a telephone call.
Wow.
So it was a good day. There were no difficulties that I can recall. Each of the words that I tried to say, that I said, was perfect.
Very good. So you simply followed Echelon simple rules and it worked 100%,
Yep.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So anything your family has said?
I spoke about it with my wife
Of course.
and explained the course, as she was fairly skeptical
You
at
can,
the start.
yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah. So after I'd explained how it worked and she saw the results, she was pleased.
Good, good. But
So
the
far.
The main thing, I want you to be pleased with yourself. That's the main thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Go.
Start?
Yes, please.
This is a BBC news report reporting upon the visit by the Indian Prime Minister. They're currently interviewing a gentleman called Charles Tournay, who is discussing the visit of the Prime Minister Modi to England.
Stephen, why you keep looking at the screen? You can't see it?
It's because the screen is a little dark and the words are inverted in the mirror. The gentleman is continuing to discuss the visit. There is an open letter which condemns the climate of violence in India.
Okay, very well. Okay. So let's discuss how you did it.
It was good. It was slightly difficult with not having a full vision on what I was looking at. That was slightly distracting. I was perhaps more comfortable when I could see it rather than see it in a reflection. I think I got a fairly good gist of what they were saying and some of the descriptions of what was on the screen. While I was talking, I couldn't listen.
Of course, that's normal. But the question is, what kind of a job did you do in terms of your speech?
I recalled one hesitation. I was rushing. There was one. I remember the one. I think apart from that, I was clear in my speech.
Explain to me when you mention hesitation, what does it mean?
It was a pause. And I
Was
think
this
previously I would have been more uncomfortable with the pause. So rather than it being a mistake, it was more a pause that I was conscious of, that perhaps the listener wouldn't be.
okay? Was that pause rational?
I think I slightly rushed when I was going to say something, but I was rational in stopping myself and getting back to regular rational speech.
So it was not a mistake.
No,
It was
no.
rational.
Yeah.
So
True.
first time I'm asking you to grade your own speech.
It was good.
It was good. So on the scale from, I don't know what grades you have in Canada. What's the highest one?
I would say an A.
A, okay. So yes, that's what I'm talking about. When you speak rationally, of course, you cannot physically make any mistakes when you performing rational etalon speech actions.
This is day 3.
Day 3, yes. And we're going to begin your examination.
Okay.
We will do exactly what we did do when I first met you before the class. And I'm going to ask you to do the reading of your troublemakers, of the words that you thought were really, really
And
difficult.
I'm doing certain letters and words and sounds. I have these nasty ass facial contortions. They're just like scrunching my face up and when I'm trying to push it out. In addition to learning how to produce ideal speech, a person who stutters can also correct, make efficient, and perfect his memory operation and all other functions of his body based on appropriate acquisition of the etalon method's information. A person can self-change their whole personality and become more productive. Thus, they can transform their whole life into that of an etalon model person.
Okay, how was your reading?
I thought the reading was very good. I don't think I made any mistakes.
Where are the difficulties that you used to have?
There were no difficulties at all.
Of course. So what we're gonna grade you with?
A plus.
A plus. Oh, I like that. Plus. Yes. Very good.
Later on, they called me back, or someone else called me back, and asked for my name, my number, my email. And then I rang up about a couple of bills, I rang a couple of places, all of them again. What's your name? What's your phone number?
Oh, great.
The dreaded 4, etc., etc. So that was great. I then went out in the afternoon. I went to a few shops and I was asking people for, where is the soup or where is this? It was things I probably wouldn't have done. I would have just gone and looked. So that was great. And then at home, I was talking a lot. And I made a couple of phone calls to some friends who both said, there's something different. You're speaking really well. So that was awesome. And then just before the call this morning, my friend Nick, who lives in Switzerland, I've spoken to him often, but we haven't video conferenced for a while. He called me on Skype and we had a 15-minute conversation on Skype and it was perfect. So it's all good. So that was my experience, which is good. I think I've always been conscious that I had an issue with my speech. The first memory of it, I think, was I went to a dentist and I was very nervous about the mask being put on my face. And I recall screaming into the mask and I was saying, mummy, 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 but the M word got stuck. And that's my first memory as a child. I was very, very young. I can't recall the exact age, but I was very young. And I don't really have a great deal of other memories from my early childhood, but I always remember it being an issue. And I think it really manifested itself more when I was at school, because you had the usual teasing, and because you're different, people tended to pick on others if they were different, whether it was their speech or their height or their hair or something. But as speech is very important, especially at school, trying to speak to friends and other teachers and the such like, it became obvious I had a speech problem. I think people treated me different. People tended to be less patient or try to finish my sentences, or they thought they were being kind. So that kind of thing happened.
And you know now why people do that.
Oh yeah.
Now you understand, because that's what we're here on this planet for. To express ourselves, not to wait for someone to express whatever he has.
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to conventional speech therapy.
How old were you when you started this process?
Probably 9 or 10 or so. And that was typically in an environment with a group, which is always fun. You have a circle of people all with the same issue, but some had it to a more intense degree. Some were worse, some were better. And you had the fun of going around the room trying to speak, and the speech therapist using a blanket approach to everybody, just doing the same drills where it mightn't have been appropriate. It was no fun. Most of the time they were just concentrating on slowing down. They were then asking me to do easy onset of letters and sounds, elongation, and other such things that are not natural. They were just tricks or ways to get some kind of speech out, even though it wasn't particularly natural and normal. So that was their approach. Now, I'm not having a go at the approach, because that was what they did, and I'm assuming they did it with their best interests at heart, but that was just with the knowledge they had.
Yep. But how did you feel when they would pull you from the classroom? Do you remember those feelings?
Oh, it was horribly embarrassing. You always had the questions, where is Stephen going, what's going on? And it kind of made it more of a focus on me and my problems. So that was no fun. And it didn't help. I went from various speech therapists at school, and then as I got into my adult life, I then had some speech therapy that I did myself and I paid for. And I think I've spent the last 35 years looking for the cure, which I know doesn't exist and it's not needed. So I spent years on and off going to therapists, but during that time, while my speech problem waxed and waned, it was good, it was bad. Some things, some situations were good, some situations were bad. So my enthusiasm to fix it went up and down during the years.
So people need to know before they sign up for any program. They need to know that that's what it is, guys. This is what you need to do. Simply learn to speak correctly. And this is what you may do. It may not be even expensive. Some of them could be even free. But that's what it does to you.
Well, the thing is, you say it's free. Now, there's a free in terms of monetary, but it's not free in terms of your effort, your time, your expectations, because what happened is on each of these methods or techniques, you invested a lot of your time, your effort, your hopes, and you were building this up into a thing that you thought was the panacea, it was the cure, it was the thing. And as each one of them happened and didn't work, the investment of your time and effort and sometimes money was just wasted.
And you know what's the most important thing that's been wasted? You're absolutely right. Your time, your precious life.
Yeah.
It will never come back. This is the period of my life. Why do I need to waste it?
Well, after the regular conventional speech therapy, I then went down the alternative routes. First one was a course run by Andrew Bell in Kirkcaldy in Scotland.
I've heard so many good things about him.
That was probably 1995, November. I went on a course there, and it was just very odd. It was just very odd techniques, and it was worrying when Andrew Bell put himself out as being a fluent speaker, and he's cured himself. But then, the very first time I met him, he was stammering. So it's kind of not a good advert for the technique. It's like purchasing a cream from a bald man who says he can cure baldness. It just doesn't work. So I spent 4 days in Scotland on the course with him. He was teaching a technique that was a non-natural technique. So it was artificial, it sounded odd, but it did give me some level of fluency, not natural, so I could speak.
What did he really, you know, Stephen, I'm sorry I interrupted you. What did he really do? I really would like to know what he did. You said it wasn't natural. What did he ask you to do? Do you remember anything?
Well, the technique was mainly easy onset and elongation, but wrapped up in a mysterious package that he was selling. So it really wasn't a proper natural way of speaking. It was just the other stuff that had been rehashed, put into a package and sold. I had about 2 or 3 months where I felt better, but then during the course of that time, the technique didn't hold up to any scrutiny. It didn't hold up to stress because it was a technique. It was a crutch.
It was artificial. It wasn't natural, as you said, yeah? And of course it didn't work.
So after the Andrew Bell experiment, I then did
I like that experiment.
I did some hypnotherapy, So I went to see a hypnotist. I was trying everything at that point. It was whatever the latest thing was, I tried it. So I went to see a lady who got me very relaxed, and I was very calm. And during that session, I was speaking great. But then, once you got out of the relaxation and the environment, bang, back to normal. You pick up the phone, you had issues. So it didn't cure, it didn't fix. It was just, again, something that seemed to work in that very relaxed, secure environment. Not the real world.
Because, once again, when you were in this secure environment, number one, did you have to speak a lot when you were there?
No.
This is reason number one. You didn't have to speak much. Just answer her question, would you like some water? Yes, please. Are you feeling good? Yes, I am. Just a couple of phrases. Of course, the demand, speaking demand was not high when you were there. Number one. And number two, of course, you didn't have to express yourself.
Yeah.
This is what we teach in the Etalon classroom. I teach you to express yourself. It doesn't matter where you are. You're angry, you express your anger. You are frustrated, you express your frustration. And you know how to do it now.
Oh, yeah.
It's very simple because it's natural. And of course, you were relaxed, you didn't speak much, you didn't have to express yourself. You did a great job. Okay?
Yeah.
But after this hypnotherapy, you got back to, again, not knowing what to do in speech.
Yeah, I think because each of these previous methods hadn't taught you the proper way to speak, so you always tended to go back to the old habits, the old norms, the old methods, because it was, in some sick way, it was comfortable. It was what you knew. So you always went back to what you know. It's natural.
Yes, stutterers have some kind of way of communication. It could be weird, it could be wrong, it could be irrational, but it's still the way to communicate with people. And that's why you said it was comfortable. At least this I know. I'm going to repeat 100 times. I'm going to block. I'm going to speak like this, but at least I know that eventually I'm going to break this block and I'm going to say it. I will express myself. Because once again, we're here on this planet to express ourselves.
I then did the McGuire Programme. I did
it.
that a number of times. The first time...
Really? Even several times. Did you have to pay several times?
I paid the first time, and then on the second or the third time, you just paid a coach fee. It was a smaller amount.
But you still paid.
But you still made a payment.
And with how many people were in the group?
I think there was about 30 odd people, at least.
Still not bad money.
Oh yeah, it was good money.
Not bad at all, okay.
So I went and did that. That would have been, let me think, 1999, the first time. So I went on that course and I learnt the costal breathing.
Very nice to know. Coastal breathing. Such a great skill. Okay.
So I went and did that. And again, I attained a level of ability to communicate that was more than I had. But again, it was using a artificial technique. I'm not sure if you know much about it, but you're drilled and you're wearing a belt around your chest, around here. And you spend time going over drilling. But it's more about the whole concept of being a recovering stutterer and accepting it. They have this, I can't remember what it's called now, it's a something hexagon, but it's all about the acceptance of being a stutterer, because the only way you can help yourself is by accepting it, embracing it, and telling everyone, hey, I'm a stutterer, and then you become more relaxed. That was the thing. It was to break down the fear and to make other people aware. But in hindsight, it's making people more uncomfortable, because if someone comes up to you and says, hey, I'm a stutterer, or I've got a problem, it might make them uncomfortable. And that isn't fair. It's not fair on them.
Absolutely. You know, I wanted to address the word drilling you said. What is drilling? Remember I said, you go to the gym, you repeat, and eventually you grow a muscle, right? That's what drilling is.
Yeah.
But instead of drilling the correct natural speaking skill, you were drilling breathing, coastal breathing.
Yep, yeah.
Is that what you wanted to learn, or you wanted to learn to speak?
Well, at that time, to be completely honest, I didn't care, because all I wanted was the result. And I met some people on the course, and there's some very nice people. There are some lovely folks. I met some of the instructors who were very helpful, and I remained friends with them for a while afterwards. And they were helpful. And I don't think that the instructors were doing anything malicious or anything bad. They were just teaching what they knew and what they understood. But it was teaching something that was not normal or not natural, because breathing is the most natural thing in the world. It just happens. And you shouldn't really have to think about breathing. It just happens.
Why did you do it several times? It didn't work first time. Why did you decide to do it even 2 more times?
It was probably the lack of alternatives.
Yeah.
And the fact that I had attained some level of fluency and control. I needed to go back to the well and just do it again, hoping that it would stick. Because I had seen people who were there who appeared to be very confident, fluent people, and you always had the thought of being like them.
You know what, I really like the word again you mentioned, appear. They appeared to be normal speakers. You never know what problem they had.
Yeah.
It appears similar. Yes, most stutterers make the same mistakes. They block, they repeat, they speak too fast. Like, very easy to see for an observer. Yeah. But in reality, it all comes from here. And every person who stutters has a different mental program. This is why we never group our students.
Yeah. The next thing after that was going on to some supplements. I had read that magnesium and other things would relax the vocal muscles. I think that was a Martin Schwartz thing. Well, I believe from the theory was if you took vitamin B1 and B12, magnesium supplements, it would assist with relaxation and relaxation of the vocal cords and muscles. So tried that, it didn't work. The next thing was I went to see a gentleman down in Los Angeles. His name is Dr. McGuire. Nothing to do with the McGuire Programme. His name is Dr. Gerald McGuire. He was working on the pharmacological way of treating speech. So at that time he was doing research and the studying of a drug called Pagaclone, which hadn't been released, and they were doing clinical trials on that drug, and they had people involved with the trials, and it gave some help to some people, but ultimately the drug wasn't released. So what he then did was he self-prescribed himself drugs, because he himself was a stutterer. He was on a drug called Zyprexa, which is known as olanzapine, which is an antipsychotic drug.
Oh my God.
Seriously. So, because what he did was he theorized the issue was with regards to the person's levels of dopamine and serotonin. in the brain. The stutterer's issue was regarding an imbalance of the dopamine and serotonin levels. So he used those kind of drugs to regulate the balance. Probably within a week of taking them, I was not blocking. My speech issues were probably 90% fixed. I was very relaxed. In fact, I was comatose. I was very relaxed. I was a zombie. So I was speaking well, but I was speaking very slowly and relaxed. I was drugged. And the other side effects to taking these drugs are weight gain, drowsiness, potential issues for diabetes. It can increase the chances of being diabetic. So for a period of time I was taking these drugs. I was getting regular blood tests, checking that my levels were as they should be. I did this for 6 months, put on 30 pounds, and then had to wean off those because I was not a happy bunny.
Oh my God. So you did your best to contribute to Big Pharma.
Yeah, I was a guinea pig.
Yeah, and so are the rest of almost 70 million people in the world.
That was the last formal therapy or treatment or practice I did. And then it's just been a conscious, no, I'm lying. There was another one. It was neuro-repatterning.
Neuro-linguistic approach, something?
It was similar to that. It was, I got from this gentleman, and I can't remember his name, but he was very helpful. He did not charge me. He sent me the book for free. And he had helped himself, as per usual. And I spoke to him, and he was very pleasant. We exchanged emails. And it was spending about 1 hour per day drilling sounds, drilling certain words and sounds, and bang, 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 for about an hour a day, which again is an investment of time. It's an hour I won't get back.
Yep.
And again, it probably helped because I was more focused and concentrating on what I was doing.
You were focused on speech. Of course it helped a little bit, but once again, you had no clue what you were doing.
No.
He was the smart one. He gave you some information. Under his supervision you can do it, but then because you didn't really understand how the whole thing works.
Yeah.
I mean, we explained to you that's how speech works.
Yeah.
And it was enough for you to begin making rational actions.
I spent 3 months drilling every day, an hour, sometimes 2 hours a day. And there was a benefit. I was getting a decent level of fluency. But then if you stopped practicing for any period of time, the benefits just went straight away. So that was my last one.
Amazing. I just love your story. How did you learn first time about Etalon program?
Okay, probably back in 2012-ish. I think what we do as stutterers is always looking for the cure, and you're constantly looking online, seeing what's the latest thing out there. And I stumbled across a video. It was Roger, the guy from the UK.
Yeah.
And it struck a chord with me because I'm from the UK. And he was very similar in some ways. So I watched the video and thought, this is too good to be true. It's another scam. I ignored it. And then I watched it again a few more times, and I got curious. And then I contacted you. And I asked you a bunch of questions that you've always been helpful. You've always been there to answer questions. But I was very skeptical. It was, you've got this Russian scientists, you've got this Russian lady in the US, all these crazy techniques and stuff that is all mysterious.
Did
and
we
secure.
teach you any techniques?
Oh God, no. It was
So,
just natural speech.
Don't even go there.
Yeah, that was my impression at the time.
Okay.
That was before I knew anything.
Uh-huh.
I just kind of figured it was a scam.
Okay.
And I looked on the message boards and Facebook, and you had all these comments from people saying, oh, don't go near, it's a scam. There's no evidence, there's no empirical evidence, there's no scientific back research. And this was from people generally that had a speech problem, that were always saying we should embrace our speech, we should embrace our stutter, we should work in the conventional way. But the conventional way has been there for 100 and odd years, but it hasn't worked. But they still keep banging on. But you would still take their word for it at the moment because you don't know any better.
Yeah.
So again, I thought, it's a scam. So I left it, and I spoke with you again, and we had a Skype conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was not sure. But then, over the years, I kept it in the back of my mind.
Of course.
And I kept going back and looking at some videos, and then I saw Roger, then I saw a young lady, then I saw a guy who was in the army, and then I'm thinking, okay, let's look at it again. It can't be a coincidence. And I think it just piqued my curiosity, and then we spoke again. And I'm here today.
3 years later.
Yeah, it took me 3 years.
Yeah, that's what happens, because this is why I film every student, because there is no other way I can demonstrate that what we do is very simple. It's no techniques, no therapy, no treatment, no cure, no. It's a simple education course.
Yep.
If you don't know how to do something, you don't go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a teacher.
Yeah.
You've been through tons of programs.
Yeah.
And you've been through Ettalon course now. Mm-hmm. How can you compare all of the other programs and the 3-day Ettalon study course?
I can honestly say there's really no comparison, because with all of the other methods and treatments and practices, they were really giving you an artificial way of doing things. It wasn't natural. It was a crutch, technique. It was a temporary fix. It wasn't educating you on how to do something right. It was more piling something else onto something you're already doing wrong. So it was just building on wrong methods. With the Ettalon way of doing things, you're taught the correct way to speak. It's rational. It's what regular everyday folk do. It's not a crutch. It's not an artificial thing. It's nothing that people are going to look at you and think, why is he doing that? It's just normal, rational speech. That's the difference. The course itself is not difficult in terms of content. I think that the way that it's taught is excellent. You take us through step by step, lesson by lesson, which is excellent. And what it teaches you is the correct way of speaking. I think that the 3 days is perfect. After the first day, I was speaking fluently, which is great. And then the lessons were added to, there was more content, but I don't think it needs to be any more than 3 days. The course itself is very good over 3 days. It's very manageable, and it was enjoyable. I'd spent 48 years looking for this panacea, this ultimate solution which didn't exist until now. I have managed to gain control over my speech, and I can now produce regular, normal, rational speech after 3 days rather than 48 years. In fact, I could do it after 1 day, if I'm being honest. But the second and the third day just built on, it added to, it strengthened my knowledge of the correct way to speak. If anyone is looking for the solution to their speech problem or their issue, and they want to speak in a rational, regular, normal way, they should definitely speak to an echelon instructor. They could go and speak to former graduates, but that would just really give them more information on that particular graduate story with their particular lilt on it or their particular issues. To get the full picture, you should really speak to an echelon instructor who will be able to assess you and your problem and then address your problem rather than somebody else's. So I would just recommend speaking to an echelon instructor, getting all of the facts rather than all of the rumours or whatever else you read and see. And once you've spoken to them, once you've got the facts, make a decision, and it's an informed decision. That's what I would do. And that's what I did. It was just one thing I wanted to say was a huge thank you from me. I think this is going to make a massive difference in my life and in everyone else's life around me. My wife also wanted to thank you because she's got her husband back. So thank you.